Okay. Well, it is 7 o'clock now, so I will welcome everyone. We really appreciate you being here, and we certainly appreciate Michelle taking time to present today. So Michelle, if you don't know her, is an instructor at Queen's University. She is also an integration support teacher with the Surrey School District. She is passionate about helping students connect with their inherent strengths as a way to improve academic engagement and prosocial behavior. When students focus on improving their gifts and sharing them in meaningful ways with our community, we all benefit. So again, thank you, Michelle, for being here. We're lucky to get to hear from you today about focused social skill development. Please feel free to use the chat box if there's something that you'd like to say. Michelle may not be able to answer it as she's presenting, but if it's not something that she can get to sort of in the flow of her presentation, I will keep track so that at the end, your questions and your comments to Michelle will be directed. And then after Michelle's presentation, I'll help field questions. So again, feel free to put things in the chat, and I'll make sure that Michelle gets the questions as she's talking and answering. And we'll aim to wrap up around 7:45 or so, depending on how things go. All right. So thanks again for being here, everyone. And without further ado, please take it away, Michelle.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's so exciting to be able to present on this format. We have a fair bit of content, so I'm going to work through it. I've got the chat up in the corner, and I'll try my best to incorporate any questions, but we will have, he said, a designated question block at the end for more discussion. So today we're going to be talking about focused social skill development. It's specifically targeted for students on the autism spectrum disorder, but as you'll see, as with most things, universal design for learning, things that work for some of our students typically benefit a much larger group. So please, keep a couple students in mind, but don't necessarily be limited by their diagnosis. Okay, so first we're going to, just so we're all on the same page, I know there's a range of experience, an overview of autism spectrum disorder, why we're focusing on social skills, an acronym called PERMA that I'm a big fan of, additional planning and considerations, and then a designated question and answer block at the end. So this is one of my favorite quotes, and it says, if you've met one person with autism, then you've met one person with autism. And what that means is autism is a spectrum. So there's such a wide range of individuals who are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And so it's very helpful just to remember that if something worked for one person, it may not work for another person. I like to think about it in the context of, say, diabetes. You wouldn't say, oh, my aunt has diabetes, so I know all about your 4-year-old and they must both like grapes because you know what I mean? That would be so silly, because the autism or the diabetes diagnosis is just one small part of their personality in addition to all the other traits. So autism is similar. As we'll look into, there are some unifying diagnostic traits, but obviously each person is much, much more than that. Okay, so just so we're on the same page, when someone's looking for a diagnosis of autism, this is from the DSM-5, and it's what psychologists use for diagnosing a wide range of things. And in bold, this is kind of the key pieces that they look for. So a person who's going to be diagnosed with autism is going to have 2 of these 3 things apparent. So the first one is deficits in social emotional reciprocity. So that's kind of that back and forth piece is challenging. The second is a deficit in nonverbal communication. So much of our communication tends to be nonverbal. And for people on the autism spectrum, there might be difficulties with displaying these nonverbal pieces or understanding these nonverbal pieces. And the third is deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. And that's kind of at the end there. And this is really important. So this means that it's difficult to, initiate and continue interpersonal relationships. Now I've got, please feel free to take a screenshot or a photo. I included the entire piece, but those are kind of the 3 areas that we're going to be focusing on. And then this part, this is something that people typically think a little bit more when they're thinking about autism. And so if you're doing a diagnosis, people are going to have 2 to 4 of these traits. The first one is stereotyped or repetitive motor movements of objects or speech. So kind of a stereotypical one is hand flapping. I've had kids that like to spin, or maybe it's phrases that are repeated. I've heard from people in the community that this is often a calming technique to kind of work with overstimulating environments. The second is an insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines, or ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior. This might look like distress if you're taking a different route to school. If the student's used to a particular pattern, seeing the same road signs, maybe there's construction, we take a different route, that can be distressing. The third, highly restricted or fixated interests. I like to think of this as a huge strength. Often, some people on the spectrum might have an area that they're highly interested in, and this is something that we want to encourage and hopefully can factor into their future employment. And the last is a hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory input. This means that for your senses, some are stronger than typical and some might be less strong. So I had a student that described bright sunshine as being physically painful. Or I've had other students who might need to bump up against things to get that receptive touch input. Again, feel free to take a screenshot of the screen. These are just things that we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about adaptions or accommodations for our students. So I love to share with my students on the spectrum that there are some amazing role models in their community that they might not be aware of. We've got Greta Thunberg, Elon Musk, and very importantly, Satoshi Tajiri, who is the creator of Pokémon. A lot of my students are very excited to learn that. I just think it's important for them to see their ASD diagnosis as a positive entrance into a really amazing community. Okay, so why social skills? So I've heard this from educators that students with autism spectrum disorder don't enjoy social interactions because they might be often observed to spend open-ended social times alone. And what I mean by that is Billy's often seen outside at recess walking around by himself. So, I mean, he probably just wants to be left alone. I like this quote. It says, help people with autism to be included in social activities. By doing this, people learn that individuals with autism are like everybody else and desire to have friendships. So just because somebody might appear to be spending time on their own doesn't mean that that's how they want it to be. It just might mean that they have difficulty with engaging and initiating social interactions. So again, coming back, this is the same that I showed you before, just chunked down. When we're looking at the diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder, we're thinking of social emotional reciprocity. So that's that back and forth. You know, how are you doing? I'm doing well. How was your weekend? That kind of back and forth. The nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interaction, that can look like difficulty deciphering facial expressions, or as I mentioned, using appropriate facial expressions or tone in communication. And finally, developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. So, how do I make a friend? And once I have a friend, how do I maintain that friendship? These are things, at least 2 of the 3, if not all 3, that all of your students with an ASD diagnosis are working with. And this is something that we can really help them with. So I think it's just helpful to keep this in mind, that this is an area that they're going to need more support. So in the same way that if we have a student in a wheelchair, we're thinking about access, we're thinking about wheelchair ramps, or elevator lifts, we're thinking about accessibility around the classroom. When we have a student with ASD, we need to think about, with these 3 pieces, how are we supporting their social emotional development? Because these are things due to their diagnosis that are going to be more challenging, but everybody wants positive relationships. Everybody wants friendships. Everybody wants community. Everyone wants to feel like they belong. So these are just things that we can keep in mind. And they might be a reason why we're seeing some challenging behaviors if students are having difficulty figuring out how to initiate and maintain those relationships. So, unstructured social opportunities can be the most challenging for the reasons that we just discussed. So if we're in class and we're playing Heads Up, 7-Up, there's a structured set of expected social interactions and steps. But when we're outside for recess, it's a bit of a free-for-all. And so that can be really difficult for some of our students. And for some students, there can be an increase in difficult behavior during these unstructured times. Recess, lunch, before, after school, or those kind of in-between learning activities. You finish one activity, but it's about 20 minutes until we start up again. These are times when we can see some challenging behaviors. And I'm going to challenge you to kind of think of 1 or 2 students, either in your classroom or your caseload, depending on your role, who exhibit challenging behaviors during unstructured times. They can have an autism diagnosis, maybe they don't, that's okay. But think of a student that sometimes, or more often than not, we come in from recess or lunch and there's a little bit of tattling and somebody maybe was aggressive or using inappropriate language, or perhaps has completely distanced themselves from the other students. So just kind of think of one of your students that kind of fits those things, and we're going to kind of explore some ideas for support. Excuse me. So a case study is, we have Jessie. She's a grade 6 student. She enjoys reading graphic novels and watching funny YouTube videos, especially about cats. Jessie lives with autism spectrum disorder. Recently, there's been an increase in challenging behavior during outside playtimes. Specifically, she's been pushing other students and calling them rude names. These students are same-aged peers from her classroom. So the behavior of concern, pushing and name calling, not something we want to happen. Now, one traditional approach is, after occurrences of the behavior, Jessie misses the next outdoor playtime and sits in the office. A note is written in the planner to inform her mother. So she comes back in from recess. We found out that she hit and called someone a name. Sorry, lunchtime, you're going to be in the office. We're going to let mom know. Now, short term, you're probably not going to have any pushing or name calling during lunch because she's in the office. But you're also not supporting her in feeling engaged and finding prosocial behaviors to do during that time. So here's another approach. Again, I encourage you to take a screenshot. So if we're thinking about pushing and name calling, it's called PERMA, and it's basically just kind of a positive spin on behavior management or behavior planning. So we need to think about, okay, so Jessie is outside and she's got some classmates, so she's pushing and calling rude names. Now, if somebody is happy, if somebody's engaged, if somebody has meaningful friendships, they're probably not going to go outside at recess and start pushing people and calling them rude names, because you're not going to get a negative reaction. But the truth is, sometimes it feels better to get a negative reaction than no reaction at all, right? Being not connected, ignored is sometimes the most painful. So some of our students are going to do things that seem confusing to us, but it is connecting them to other kids, even in a not positive way. So with PERMA, we think, okay, stop the bus. Obviously, Jessie's not feeling connected with her peers. So how can we support perhaps her feeling more positive emotions at school? So doing things she loves, feeling more engaged. How do we help foster positive relationships? How do we help her feel meaning and feel like she is connected to the school community? And how do we make her feel accomplished, like she's working towards a purposeful goal? Now, I don't need to tell you, there are a million ways to meet these, but today we're going to talk about one of them. But all this is kind of flipping things on its head a little bit, because some people might come back and say, wait, sorry, so she's outside calling people's names, pushing, and what we're going to do is try and make her happier and do positive things? That seems a little silly. But the truth is that when kids feel better, they do better. People want to be connected. They want to be part of community. And if we help empower our kids to do so, then we can trust that they're going to live up to our expectations of them. So this is just a little bit of a reframe sometimes, that it's easy to step in perhaps with the punishment approach, but instead we can think of, okay, if we're engaging in negative behaviors outside, maybe it's because we don't have meaningful friendships and we're struggling to interact. So instead of punishing the behavior, we can empower her to build more positive friendships, so she'll spend her recesses and her lunches doing more positive things. So one way that I like to do this is lunchtime clubs. Why? It's really easy. It's fun. You're going to be, with your kids at lunchtime anyways. And so it's an open-ended opportunity to provide structured social opportunities centered around an area of strength or interest for the targeted student. So as we talked about, a lot of people on the spectrum have very specialized interests. Awesome. We grab onto that. And you know what? It's also a meaningful way to address, target, and assess IEP goals. So check, check, check. And it's enjoyable. It's fun. I way prefer to kind of set up these opportunities than run around at lunchtime disciplining or, nagging kids to behave appropriately. We can flip it on its head and provide opportunities for them to be successful. So step one, I want you to think of your most challenging student, the one that is giving you the most bit of headache outside, perhaps at lunch and recess. You're thinking of ones that are engaging in negative behaviors during outside playtimes. Maybe they're having trouble with making or maintaining friendships. Key, the home and school team are open. So this you can, at this point in the year, you can send out an email. In September, I like to bring this up. I kind of have a couple kids in mind, bring it up during IEP meetings, make sure everyone's on board, and key, the student wants to do it. That's the most important. They think this is a fun idea. So number two, what do they like to do? What makes them happy? Do they like to draw? Do they like to play basketball? Do they like to bake? Do they like to play Risk? Anything. What makes them happy? And that's such a great incentive and way to connect them with like-minded peers. Now you can talk to them. You can Google a preference questionnaire and kind of go through different things with them. You can talk to their school and their home teams. What do they like to do in their free time? Okay, so you need to think about, where are we going to have this and where are we going to get what we need? So if you're a classroom teacher, easy peasy, you can just use your classroom. I work as an IST, kind of like resource in other districts. So if I have a space in a school, it's quite small. So in the past, I've asked the librarian if there's a time during the day that works. I've used the packed kitchen. I've used the gym when there's a free block during lunchtime. So you got to talk with your school team if you're not a classroom teacher. And supervision, you don't want to be on your own. Maybe you got to, heat up your lunch. Maybe you have to run to the washroom. You are going to be inviting lots of kids with complex needs. So talk to the EAs of your students, talk to other school staff, see who else is interested. Plan, how many participants? Now this is flexible, and most importantly, it has to be in line with current COVID restrictions. So I would really encourage you to make sure that your administrator is part of this team, and thinking about who in their bubble would be appropriate. Think about when you want to have it, maybe once a week, twice a week, every day at lunch, if that's a possibility. And then sensory adaptions. So do you have a quiet space where they can go if it's too much? Do you have things like headphones or other noise canceling options? Just so we're making it an inclusive space. And most importantly, have fun. It doesn't have to be perfect. The important part is that you are allowing the student to share their interest with the wider school community. So we're flexible, we're changing, it's relaxed. And I like to, after sessions, just chat with the students and staff. What worked? What didn't work? What do you want to do next time? So our case study, the first club that I did was the Pokémon Drawing Club. I had a group of 4 neurodiverse grade 7 students who were obsessed with Pokemon. They lived and dreamed it. That's all we talked about. And they self-identified as the Poke Friends, but they were having a lot of trouble at recess and lunch with conflict resolution. So they were buddies, but they didn't know how to work through disagreements. So we started this for them. We were in the library. We initially started with, I would go up to the front, I would lead a drawing lesson on our Pokemon of the day that they picked. And then one of the students would kind of read out the stats and statistics. It kind of evolved to, we would come in, we would have books on the tables of different Pokemon. You would pick who you wanted to draw. Different students would lead different drawing activities. The point was we were getting together, we were supported, and we were doing something that they enjoyed. I had one student there who was more interested in animals. Behavior challenges, ADHD and ODD were his diagnoses. He asked to start his own club, which was awesome. So we just picked another day in the library. He was one of those students that loved to be up in front of the room, and he would get attention any way he could. So we were trying to build more opportunities for positive attention. So he would go up, lead the drawing. We actually were able to secure a bulletin board by the library where we could display the work of the students. And I would often walk with him by the bulletin board and we'd talk about what wonderful work he was doing. So that was a lot of fun. Another option, the following year, we had a board game club. This year, I actually had a portable and I shared it with the childcare worker. So we actually did this 5 days a week. For me specifically, I had 6 students that I was thinking of. Our childcare worker had a couple as well. This was before COVID, so it was an open door policy that we would kind of cap at a certain point. We'd have different board games out. Students could come in and out. We typically had the same group of kids that would join us, and it was just kind of a nice way to get together, and then we could support some of that conflict resolution. The pack was lovely and purchased us some board games, so feel free to reach out if you need more supplies. And finally, it's individualized to the students. So you're following their interests and their interests may change, and that's okay. You're moving with them. At the end of the day, this is just providing them with an opportunity to shine and share what they love to do. It's really important to get your school and home teams involved. And and adjusting, right? You're checking in, what's working, what's not, and moving along with them. And just having fun, enjoying your students, having an opportunity to connect and build relationships in a positive way. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to open up for questions. Let's see. Thank you, David. I see that you're going to send the slides to everyone. That's wonderful. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, great question. A PAC is Surrey-centric, so it's probably different acronyms for different districts. It's a parent advisory council. So it's a group of parents who volunteer. They often fundraise for the school, and they meet with administration to kind of make school decisions. So it's basically, talk to your principal. There is funding available often if you kind of ask for it. And that's just one avenue to ask parents if there's funds available. So Trisha asked a great question. She said, would you encourage having clubs that include students that are not on the spectrum? Absolutely. So we're never identifying this as like, oh, this is this is just for our ASB friends, say, like some people identify as ASB, high functioning autism. This is for everybody. So we'd say Pokémon Drawing Club. And if you love Pokemon, come join us. But then I just kind of invite some of my friends that I really want to be there. So you're targeting invitations to students, but absolutely, these are inclusive spaces where anyone who's interested can join. So someone else asked the same question. We're encouraging friendships with all students. So we might be creating it for a student on the autism spectrum, but our goal is to connect them with like-minded peers, neurodiverse friend groups. I have a student who's very socially aware. He needs social skills for sure, but he does not want to be that kid who's doing a club with a teacher versus the rest of the kids who are doing whatever they want. Okay, so that's a great point. So some students are super excited to be like, oh, this is my club, come on in, and some do not want that attention. So if that's the case, I would think about maybe kind of incognito outside play groups. So if they love soccer, if your school allows Beyblades, if they, perhaps they love Manhunt, what I would do is just try and help them connect with like-minded peers. There's a game called Manhunt that it's like tag that our students seem to be obsessed with. So if that's something that he enjoys, I would say, okay, so I want you right after recess to meet by the tetherball pool, and you've already identified some other friends in his class who want to play. So you're just facilitating that play group. And then maybe you're just hanging out nearby to help navigate any social problems, but just kind of as incognito as possible. So absolutely being mindful of if the student wants you there or doesn't want that kind of hovering, especially for older kids.
Michelle?
Yeah.
So it's Sandra here. I have a question. I have a student, grade 8 students, okay? I just joined this class like a few months ago.
Okay.
And so teaching French, I would say.
Okay.
Yes, so I have seen that every time when I tell her to correct, like she writes a sentence and there are a few words which has missing letters or not properly written. So when I tell her to correct the sentences, so she would fret or she would go at home. She wouldn't say anything in class, but at home she would be crying.
Okay.
So just recently online, we were doing some work and then I told her, okay, this word is not correctly written. Can you please write it? Okay, I typed it and showed it to her. Yeah. And then she went away from my class and she started crying. So mom called me and we have stuff. So I want to know how to address this problem. I haven't read anything about her yet because we are online and have just joined the school. I know that she's on a spectrum, and if you see in class, she's okay, but I don't know how to handle this situation. I've been told to build a rapport with the child. I'm
Yeah.
trying. I talk to her. When I talk to her, everything is okay.
Yeah.
But when I do my class, so she keeps telling that she sent me a note through email that she doesn't want to join my class. She doesn't want to come in class, but she comes.
Okay.
And I don't know how to handle the situation.
Yeah.
So what would you say about this?
It might be a good idea to, I mean, it's obviously online is a different format.
Yeah.
It might be worthwhile connecting perhaps with your counselor if possible.
Okay.
A lot of kids on the or young adults on the autism spectrum have co-occurring mental health disorders. So I don't know, but it does sound like there might be an anxiety component as well.
Yeah.
Oftentimes students that seem to, present, but then kind of go home and unload quite a bit. That does sound a little bit like an anxiety piece. So that might be, the counselor might be a good resource. And there might be a little bit of perfectionism too, where, kind of getting frustrated at yourself for making mistakes and then feeling overwhelmed. So, yeah, I think I would just kind of maybe come at it with that lens and kind of think of, are there some kind of supports related to anxiety or perfectionism that might be helpful? Kind of things like everybody makes mistakes. That's how we learn, kind of having maybe those sort of conversations. And maybe, if she doesn't like it having verbally shared, maybe you could, email those changes to her. That might be an idea as well. Yeah, I don't know if that was helpful, but that might be a lens to kind
Yes,
of.
yeah, that's what I did. I had a one-on-one meet with her. I told her that we grow with our mistakes. I
Yeah.
told her that even today, at my age, I have some mistakes. So where I'm okay to correct it. I'm okay to go along or move on.
Mhm.
So I think she understood that. But then, yes, you said, it's best to have a counselor. She maybe will be a great help. I connected to the teachers who have been working with her before, to the principal. I didn't connect with mom right now because I feel I'd had a very brief chat with her. I'm not ready to have a one-on-one conversation with her. So maybe later or with someone along with me, because I could see her reaction. She is the parent, so I need to get ready for that. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And just letting her know. The last thing I'm going to say is maybe and it's great you've identified that, it's really challenging for her to accept feedback with spelling mistakes. So I might set the goal of, and letting her know ahead of time, I'm going to let you know one word today. And I'm going to give you the corrected spelling. And your goal is to kind of accept that feedback and then kind of build up from there. And then if there's more spelling mistakes, I would just leave it for now. And then maybe the next time increase it to 2. So you're kind of building her tolerance with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Maybe a good idea. And someone else had a really great idea. They said, kind of making it more generalized. So, I noticed a few of us are having a hard time spelling. Let's do it together. So you're kind of supporting the group. So that's great too, instead of that kind of individualized feedback. But it sounds like you're on the right track. If it's okay, I'm just going to, just being mindful of time. I just noticed another question asking for high school students. It depends on your kids. I've seen some schools do like D&D clubs, so like Dungeons and Dragons. I know my Poke friends that I mentioned were super excited because their catchment high school had a Pokémon club that they're going to join. So, in high school, there is kind of a structure for teacher-led clubs. So that could be an avenue to go down. Thinking about space that's available, but absolutely, just chatting with your student, what are their goals, especially older kids, who do you want to connect with? What do you enjoy doing in your spare time? And providing that feedback. And someone had Another idea, Sandra, maybe equipping her to use French spell check. That might be a good idea. So she can kind of correct it on her own.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
That's a really nice idea.
Yeah.
Because I use spell check, so I mean that's a great.
That's what I told her before coming. So not to rush and give me work. Just I had several students having spelling problems, so I leave some. But a few words I have to tell them, for example, 2 words which are different in the meaning. If it was only the spelling mistake, I would have let it go, but they were, she had taken a word which had different meaning to the word we were expecting. So that's why I told her that she will need to learn that gradually. She needs to accept, which is very difficult for spectrum students. Yes, and she tries to be the perfectionist, but I need to talk to her more. I need to check with this more. Yes, for a follow-up though.
And I'm sure it's something that's, you know, in other aspects of her life as well. So that would be really meaningful to help her. With that piece.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle, there's a question from Trisha about tips for speaking with the mainstream students who are in the same clubs as the
I missed
ASD
that one.
students.
Thank you. These are, yes, so that's awesome. So I would, I guess it depends on the high school students specifically. So you really kind of want to be careful about this. I think it's super important, and education is fantastic. I would talk to the parents and ideally the student with ASD who you're supporting and saying, you know, I want to empower your friends to learn how to be the best friend they can to you. Is this a conversation that you want to be a part of? And I've had some families who are super open about it. You know, I've had students who love talking about autism. You know, I had a student who loved The Good Doctor, and that was kind of his way to engage with the community, and we're very proud about it. And I've had other parents that say, you know, John does not know he's on the spectrum. He is not to know about his diagnosis. So we need to have discretion about it. So I would start by talking with the parents. Then if they're okay, talk with the student. Someone made a great suggestion about, I think the most easy way to do is to make sure everyone's okay is to have that student in particular be out of the room for a period of time and kind of talk with the rest of the group. Yeah, and I would stay kind of as empathetic as possible. Just like I told you that, you know, this student may have difficulty with reading emotions, or depending on the child, perhaps it's a student who might say the occasional inappropriate word, or might need a little bit more processing time. So you're kind of thinking about, you know, what are some things that'll help them engage better with this student. And then I apologize that I don't have an example, but on YouTube's a fantastic resource, and there's some really great creators with autism who create videos about autism spectrum disorder. So that might be a fun place to connect. Just something short, as someone mentioned, just a brief overview of ASD. And I think the big takeaway is, you know, we all have things that we're good at and things that we're not good at. And if you're helping to connect them over a shared interest, people often come out of their bubble. And certainly if things come up, perhaps there's a student who struggles a little bit more with conflict resolution, you might need to guide it a little bit more. In the past, if it's not necessary, I often don't really kind of when we start the club, I don't really make it explicit about who it's for. I just kind of say, oh, you know, we like Pokémon, or we're here to cook. And we just kind of have our students with special needs sprinkled in. But if there is an issue that keeps coming up, I think having a team meeting with the group and kind of brainstorming ways that we can support our friend is an excellent idea, because students want to help and they want to support, and you're just kind of empowering them by giving them more information. I don't know if that was a great answer. It's just, it depends on the kid, depends on your comfort level, and it's an ongoing conversation.
Okay, let's do a last call for questions, and then if there are no more, we can wrap up.
Oh, I am going to put here is my email. If you think of anything later on, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to connect.
Thanks so much, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. It was a great presentation, really informative. I hope all of you guys enjoyed it and got something out of it. I'm sure you did. But yeah, we'll post the recording and the slides. What we're gonna do two things. We're gonna post them on our website, but I will also send them out in an email to everyone that registered, so that you have them. Okay, and we do this almost every month. So keep your eye on the email and social media, and we'll see you guys all again, hopefully.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
No problem.